You studied aerospace engineering, are a pilot flight instructor, worked as a software engineer, now in med school, planning to be a doctor. Do you realize that you're every Indian auntie's dream son right now?
Apparently not my mom's.
Oh man. Did they want you to be a doctor?
They never really pushed me to do anything.
Okay.
I think, like you said, they're happy. They're like, Indian kids are supposed to be engineers or doctors, and our son wants to be both. So you know what? He's already messed up in the head enough, I guess.
Yeah. So they didn't push you in any way. Everything that you pursued was also just based off your upbringing, what you're just inherently interested in.
Yeah, in many ways. I mean, I'm not gonna say they didn't influence at all.
Yeah.
What I wanted to do, I think it just so happened that what I wanted to do probably coincided with probably what they found to be acceptable.
Yeah.
Like, I never had an interest in being an airline pilot. I think if I really pushed for that,
Yeah.
I might have gotten some pushback.
Yeah.
But it's not something that I really wanted, so
Yeah.
it just kind of worked out that way.
I guess speaking of pilots, I think you have a very interesting career journey, a very interesting list of hobbies and interests. I would love if you could kind of walk us through your journey from school, your educational background, your career journeys. Take us all back from where it started.
Sure. I grew up in kind of the suburbs of Seattle. That's where I was born and lived the early part of my life through pretty much all of elementary school. And I'm the child of immigrants from India. So I was the first generation to be kind of born and brought up in the United States. And so my family had a lot of ties still to India, and they still do. And so from a young age, I've frequently gone with my family to visit India. The earliest being probably when I was a couple months old. I think it was my first trip to India. And so just growing up, a lot of my formative years I've spent on airplanes and traveling, and it's been sort of core memories, I think. And maybe that's what influenced my interest in airplanes. Also, growing up in Seattle, that's where Boeing has its headquarters, or not headquarters, their factory, where they manufacture most of their airplanes, commercial airplanes. And so, I remember at a very young age, we'd go, to the Boeing factory. It was like a tourist attraction. If family came, we'd go there, just like we would go to the Space Needle or one of the other places. And so, kind of going on that factory tour, I just remember, there's this one vantage point where you look down on the entire assembly floor and you just see all of these airplanes that are in this assembly line. They're so big that they only have maybe 4 in this giant warehouse, in a line. But they were building the Boeing 787, I think, I remember. And I just remember I was like, wow, this is cool. There's so many people there, all these parts that are being put together to form this giant machine. Who are these people? And my dad was like, well, those people are aerospace engineers. And so 6-year-old me was like, well, I want to be an aerospace engineer. And I didn't know what that was or, what it entailed, but it seemed cool enough. And so that, I don't know, that's probably a cheesy early life story. From there, right before I started middle school, I moved to California, and that's kind of where I finished middle school and high school, the Bay Area. And I guess throughout middle and high school, I played a lot of Flight Simulator on the computer, and I found that really cool. And I learned a lot also about airplanes and kind of the system that is the system that airplanes operate in with air traffic control and all this organized system that we have all around us, but not many people really realize the extent of it. And then throughout that, I was in I think probably 9th grade, and I found out that I could learn to fly a real plane at that age, and that there was a small airport 15 minutes from my house where I could learn to fly, and I could fly a plane all by myself at 16, and I could get my license at 17. And I was like, well, that's cool. I want to do that. And so, it wasn't as easy as just doing that, but one thing led to the other, and I eventually found myself training to be a pilot, which was pretty cool in high school. Not a lot of people have the opportunity to do that. And I eventually got my private pilot license at the age of 18, and kind of kept going. I realized kind of as I was training that my goal, in terms of the flying at least, was I wanted to have some purpose to it. It was a lot of fun, but it's hard to justify just flying by myself or taking my friends up. So I was like, I think a nice goal. I didn't want to fly for the airlines either. So I was like, a nice, long-term goal for me would to be a flight instructor, teach people how to fly. the small planes. And that was kind of my goal. And, I ended up becoming a flight instructor when I was like 22. So I've been a flight instructor for a few years now as kind of a side gig. And honestly, it's great. So that's kind of my flying side of things. I guess I just never saw myself as like an airline pilot as far as a career goes. There were probably like two things that interested me. One was continuing to be this aerospace engineer, whatever that was, right? And then the other thing was, another core memory, I guess, was when I was in middle school, I ended up breaking my hand or my arm, and then that healed up, and then I broke it again, just doing various things like playing football and things like that. And so there was a long time, there was probably a period of almost a year, I would say, just with both of those events put together and the healing process, where I was pretty much going to the doctor like every week or every other week to get an x-ray, check up on things. And so I guess I really like interfaced with the medical system there. And I was like, this is kind of cool in terms of another world that, operates. You've got the aviation world going on. You've got this world at Boeing on the floor where people are assembling all these things. And then you've got the medical world where, you have all these people kind of coming together, seeing patients, fixing their problems. So I found that really fascinating too. So I think going into high school, as far as like what I wanted to be when I grew up, I was like, aerospace engineering sounds cool, and maybe I want to be a doctor too. And so those are the kinds of things that were in the back of my head. And then the thing is, to be a doctor, it takes a really long time, and it's a really long and drawn out process, and there's a lot of uncertainty involved. For starters, you have to get an undergraduate degree before you can even dream of going to medical school. And so a lot of people use that undergraduate degree as a stepping stone to go to medical school. But technically, you can major in anything you want for your undergraduate degree. And I was like, well, I'm also interested in aerospace engineering, so what if I just went to school for aerospace engineering, and then I can defer this decision for later, right? And so that's kind of what I was like, is that even possible? And I used my friend Google to, can I become a doctor after becoming an aerospace engineer? I found all these like Reddit threads and stuff that were like, are you stupid? And I was like, dang, am I stupid? But yeah, it's like no one ever does that, right? I've met one other person actually who did that. And he's also in medical school now. Yeah. And I met this guy in undergrad. But there are a few people who are aerospace engineers and then doctors, but it's not a very common thing. And no one thinks of that because they're two separate, really cool fields. And so why would you do both, right? Yeah. But for me, it was kind of, if I had to characterize it, it was probably part strategic in the sense that I can defer this decision, and I have this backup career option if things don't work out, I don't go to medical school, or I don't want to go to medical school, like I still have this degree that I can get a job with and do stuff. Part of it is fear of uncertainty also. It's like, am I going to get into medical school? Yeah. Do I want to do that? What does it take? I didn't have close family or anything that was in medicine. I didn't really know what it was other than, stereotypical things that everyone knows about doctors, and my own experience navigating the medical system when I was in middle school, right? Which is a very small, narrow slice of what the medical world is. So, yeah, so it was really, honestly, a kick the can down the road kind of thing. And really all you need to do during your undergrad to go to medical school is take a few classes. There's like basic biology and basic chemistry and things like that. And I could easily fit that in my elective time, so it wasn't too bad. You actually don't need a lot of like medical knowledge to go to medical school because they just assume they're going to teach you that anyway in medical school. So like you don't even need to take anatomy or anything like that before you go to medical school. It's really like foundational science stuff. And so there was a decent amount of overlap with just my undergraduate curriculum with general education classes and things like that. So it wasn't too bad to actually like juggle doing that. And then the fall of 2019, I was in my junior year of college, and I was like, I kind of want to study abroad. So specifically, like my school had a study abroad program in Sweden. So this would be during the spring of 2020 is when I would study abroad in Sweden. And so I was kind of like going for that. That's kind of what my plan was. And it was like maybe August of 2019 when I just went to the career fair on a whim. And I was like, let me go talk to some companies, just see if I can get an internship or something, because I don't want to like actually work for them like long term. I want to go to medical school, right?
Yeah.
But why don't I just go and talk to them, see what happens? Well, one thing leads to another, and I get a job offer to do a semester-long internship in the spring of 2020 when I was planning to go to Sweden. And this internship would be in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I suddenly had this crisis. I was like, do I go study abroad in Sweden, or do I go to an equally foreign place, Cedar Rapids, Iowa? One of which I have to pay money to go to. The other one I get paid to go to. And sure, Iowa is not Sweden, but I've never been to Iowa, and I don't think I would have ever otherwise gone to Iowa.
Yeah.
So eventually the financial part of me said, okay, you know what, this is more of a financially smart decision. I'm getting paid to do this versus paying money to go to Sweden. You know what, I'm just going to take this, right? So I did, and honestly, it was the best decision ever because as we all know, in the spring of 2020, the world went to hell. And, all my friends who studied abroad had to come back within a month because, COVID and everything just shut down, and they shut down all the study abroad stuff. Wow. Versus for me, I got to keep my internship and it just transitioned to remote work. So honestly, like looking back, I'm really glad I made that decision, right? But obviously I had no foresight of that. No one did.
Yeah.
But I guess that was also a big turning point in my career because taking that internship suddenly gave me an in into this company. And it also almost guaranteed that I would graduate a semester late.
Okay.
Because I'm spending the semester working. And the way medical school works is there's a lot of lead time when you're applying to medical school. And medical school only starts in the fall. So me graduating a semester late means that I could only start the subsequent fall at the earliest.
Okay.
So essentially, I would graduate in December and I could only start medical school at the earliest in that following August or so.
Got it.
So I already knew that there's going to be essentially a year between when I would have graduated to when I would have started medical school. But now I had this in with this company, and I enjoyed the work I was doing for this company. And, I'd worked a lot remote just during COVID, and they offered to keep me on during school, like on a part-time basis. So I took that offer. I came back the next summer. And then when I graduated, it transitioned to a full-time job offer. So I'd continuously worked for this company for essentially a year and a half as an intern and part-time through school. And then I had a full-time offer after I graduated. And so I thought, okay, this is perfect, actually. Why not? Like, what's another year or two in this long road to becoming a doctor? Honestly, I might as well just ride the wave and keep working. So I took the job offer. I moved to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, full-time after I graduated.
Nice.
And I started working. And then it was perfect because it gave me also time, like, outside of work to focus on my application and think about why I wanted to go to medical school. And it's a lot easier when you're working 9 to 5 to have free time to focus on that stuff rather than when you're in school and it feels like it's almost a 24/7 type work.
Yeah.
I ended up submitting my application and I got into the University of Iowa, which was pretty much very close to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where I lived. So I didn't really move much and locked me into Iowa for another 4 years at least. So that's where I am now as a medical student at the University of Iowa.
It sounds like after you graduated from undergrad, you then worked, was it for did you say an aerospace company or?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I worked for, an aerospace company, essentially. So they are like, they make specific components that get sold to aircraft manufacturers.
Okay.
So like Boeing and Airbus, like those big companies that make airplanes, certain components, they don't make all the components themselves. They actually buy components from other companies to put on their planes. So like specifically the component that my company made was electronics in the cockpit of airplanes. So when the pilot is sitting down flying the plane, they have a lot of instrumentation and displays that show them various things like how fast they're going, information about their systems, how much fuel they have, like all that kind of stuff. Like kind of like we have in a car, like in your dashboard, but obviously more complicated because it's an airplane. And so my company made that and they would sell it to aircraft manufacturers to put on their planes. And because each plane is slightly different, each manufacturer and each model of plane needed a certain variation of that. And so that's where we made our money. And we also sold to military as well, which had their own specialized needs.
American military? US military. Gotcha.
Well, we sell the U.S. military and also foreign militaries as well, because
Really?
because a lot of these aircraft models that like Lockheed Martin or whoever makes, they get sold to the U.S. military, and then their like old generation stuff gets sold to like other countries too, the NATO countries, South American countries. So it's kind of interesting because it's like the same exterior model of plane, but like the interior systems will be different. Like the U.S. will obviously keep the latest and greatest to themselves, but then maybe like the previous generation of stuff they'll sell to other countries because those other countries would rather buy the slightly older tech than innovate themselves because they don't have the means necessarily to make it themselves.
And then what type of work were you doing for this aerospace company?
I was mostly writing software.
You're writing software?
Yeah, it was mostly software engineering.
Yeah.
But it was like embedded system stuff. So it was like mostly like C code going on these processors and units that had like less processing and memory capacity than like our phones.
Yeah. Did you have to teach yourself how to code in order to get the software engineering job? Did you already have a good coding background from your time in college? How did that process
Yeah,
go?
I had a good coding background in college. I had like good coding skills. I TA'd for a few like CS classes, so I had like learned how to code since probably high school. And that's a skill that I continued to cultivate in college. I think the big reason I probably got the job is because it's not just any software, right? It's the fact that I knew how to write code, but also I had an understanding of the application of the system.
Okay.
So I think my background as an aerospace engineer made me understand, like, it's not just the fact that this display item is green in color and looks like this. It's the fact that that represents this particular system on the plane. And by understanding how that system works, you have a understanding of why it's supposed to function the way it does.
Oh, okay, interesting.
And also as a pilot, also that's another perspective that I brought in just as a user, because I would think, okay, if I'm a pilot and I'm looking at this, like, what do I really want out of it, right?
Yeah.
What do I want the function to be like? As an engineer, I understand the interplay of the systems that create that function to work.
Yeah.
And then the software was really just the implementation of it. So if you're just purely a software engineer and you don't have that other knowledge, it's not to say you can't do the same role, it's just that the perspective you bring is very different, right? Your perspective is on, like, how do I make this flag go green?
Yeah.
Not why should it go green?
Makes sense. Were most of your colleagues also similar to you, where they had like an aerospace engineering background, or were any of them like pure computer science majors, didn't have that aerospace background?
There was definitely a decent amount that were pure software engineers.
Okay.
There was also a lot of people who had aviation experience, who either were pilots themselves or had an aerospace degree. So it's just kind of a mix of people, and everyone brought their own perspectives, right? It's not to say that the software engineer doesn't have their own unique perspectives, for sure.
Yeah.
Because they are more knowledgeable on coding and things like that, right? And so they can write efficient implementations for stuff. So I mean, it's a collaborative effort, like anything.
Yeah.
Like everyone on the team collaborates and brings their own perspective to design and implement certain things.
Got it. Did you think college was worth it for you to get this opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely, I guess. As far as that engineering job goes, I think for sure I wouldn't have gotten it unless I was in college. That's on a baseline level, yeah, without a college degree, there's no way I would have gotten that job.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the subtle other functions that college played as well, which is that it provides the networking opportunity, the career fair as an institution for me to go and actually meet with the companies, rather than being some no-name that's applying online to various requisitions.
Okay.
So that face-to-face opportunity was made possible because of the college I went to.
Yeah.
In addition to that, as far as the specific technical skills goes that allowed me to perform my job, not necessarily. And I think with any engineering degree, any engineering graduate realizes that the specific things that they learn in college are not necessarily applicable to the job that they end up doing. I think, for example, like a lot of my classes were like, take this equation and derive it by hand.
Yeah.
And I would have like 3 pages of like calculus, right?
Yeah.
And differential equations and like all this stuff to like take one equation and bring it to another and bring in all this physics and stuff. I didn't use any of that in my job.
Of course.
everyone has computers, right? And
Yeah.
if we really needed to implement that, there's already a tool that's been written to do that
Yeah.
electronically and way faster than by hand.
Yeah.
Is it important to have that baseline knowledge and like conceptually understand why this happens? Yeah, absolutely. But as far as the nitty gritty goes, and the theories and formulas that I was deriving, like I was never doing that. I never did any calculus in my job.
Yeah.
I did do a little bit of linear algebra, which I thought was interesting,
Okay.
just with graphics manipulation and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think with anything, like a lot of the things you learn when you go into an engineering job is stuff you learn on the job.
Yeah.
I think that on-the-job training is very important.
And what did your day-to-day look like when you were working as a software engineer?
It was mostly like a 9 to 5 type of gig. We were sort of hybrid in person and remote. I took on a few different roles during my time there. We had like agile framework. That's a framework that's used sometimes in a lot of companies these days. So there's different roles within that agile framework that are like sort of leadership type roles. You're still like an engineer, but you're taking more ownership over stuff. So I was like a scrum master at some point for my team. But the day-to-day, really, we would have planning every so often, like every couple months or so, where we would commit to accomplishing a certain subset of tasks. And we'd say, okay, over the next 3 months, I think this is, as a team, we can commit to getting this done. And then we would partition that out individually to different people on the team and say, hey, why don't you take this task because you're knowledgeable about that system and go deal with that. As far as the task goes, it's a mix of stuff. Like when I joined the program, it was kind of midway through its life cycle, so to speak. So like, in the beginning stages of a product, it's a lot of design and brand new implementation. And as the product matures, there's less and less new features that you add, and more so you're fixing stuff that doesn't work, right? And there's a lot of back and forth with our customer who we're selling this product to, who will come back and say, hey, we actually tried this out and we don't like how this looks anymore. Even though originally we said we wanted it to look like this, we realized that actually we don't want that. So can you change that now?
Yeah.
And also like, this isn't really working in this specific case. Can you like go take a look at that? Which is bug fixes and stuff like that. So I did kind of a mix of stuff because there was a lot of new features that I got to pioneer and really think about how do I do something that no one's ever done before. That takes a lot of thinking power, and I found that very interesting. A lot of it also was just like, okay, I need to go fix this. Like, this is supposed to be red, we need to make it green. And it doesn't take a lot of cognitive power, but still stuff that needs to get done.
What would be the consequences if a piece of software that you wrote didn't work?
Yeah, that's a good question. In an industry where a lot of things are safety critical, we have a lot of checks and balances to make sure that we don't get to that point. And so all of the software that we write is linked to what we call requirements. And so we have a very strict set of requirements that actually originates from our customer. So other teams, they'll actually interface with the customer and say, okay, we're going to build this product for you. What exactly do you want it to do? They'll be like, well, I just want it to like do this, right? And that'll be like a very generic umbrella as to like what the product should accomplish. That's from the perspective of perhaps the user or the buyer says, I want, this system to show me how fast I'm going, let's say, right? Well, the engineers then have to break that down and figure out, okay, how do I implement a product that shows how fast the pilot is going? And it actually ends up breaking down into sub layers, because that one thing might branch out to something that says like, okay, well, we need to display something on the screen that like has a number on it. And then another thing that says like, well, when plane goes fast, number goes up. When plane goes slow, number goes down, right? It's like, and then that further gets broken down until you're at a point where they're like very granular requirements where you're almost like, okay, if pilot gives gas, then increment the internal counter that like keeps track of the speed or something like that. Everything gets broken down hierarchically and can be traced up. So any granular thing that I have in the software, pretty much every line of code, if I trace it up the tree, I can eventually get back up to that very original, what we call level 0 requirement that says, show me how fast the plane goes.
Yeah.
Right? So everything is very linked hierarchically in the code, and that provides for traceability.
Yeah.
So I can say, okay, if this line of code doesn't work, what is it supposed to do? And like, what is the overarching purpose of it too, right? And for every requirement like that, there's also a test. So we have a whole set of software that's a testing suite where we'll actually test whether the code actually works. In two ways. We call it verification and validation, which sounds similar, but they're slightly different. Verification is more so like, does the code work as it's intended to? And validation is like, does it make sense that it's doing that?
Okay.
So verification is like, okay, the code says that like when this happens, if this happens, then this should happen. Does that actually happen? Like if you have like an if statement, like a conditional, if this, then do that, then you'll test like, okay, if it is that, does the other thing happen? If it's not that, does this other thing happen? And then you'll test like edge cases as well. So it's like for example, if it's like if the speed is greater than 100, do you get it saying it's red or something like that, right? So you'll test it, you'll be like, okay, let's say the speed is 101, is it red? Yeah. Let's say the speed is 99, is it red? No, it shouldn't be. What if the speed is exactly 100? Does it work as like those edge cases and things like that? So that's verification. That's like software, all software driven. But then the validation is more so saying like, does it make sense that the display turns red when the speed is 100? Like, why are we setting it at 100? Like, what is the purpose of that kind of? So there's a lot of thought, like more so than just writing the software itself. It's almost like the tests are more robust than the actual software itself, because we want to make sure that we test all of the different edge cases, and then we have a whole like simulated environment where we can test it, where we have like a virtual environment that's running this whole system like on the PC. We have like actual hardware that we have set up in like a lab it's like almost like a flight simulator type setup. Like we have a lab, it's got the actual hardware on there, so we can test the code like in the PC environment. That's like a virtual environment. You can test it on the actual hardware, and then once we're happy with it, we'll give it to the customer as like a beta build, and then they'll test it on like the actual plane perhaps and say, does it still work?
Okay.
And so there's all these levels of checks, I think, that ensures that at the most granular level even, that things work, because everything is very safety critical.
Seems very important. If there weren't all these systems of checks and balances, if you didn't have all these tests in place, could a potential consequence of, let's say, messing up a line of code be that the end customer pilot sees like the wrong speed on their like dashboard when trying to fly a plane?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is a potential consequence. That's why there's such robust systems in place, and there's standards also as to like, in software, how robustly do things need to be tested. There's actually like standards that we follow and specific technical specs that we conform to. That's like an industry-wide like standard in order to ensure that safety stuff. Now, as far as the actual like hardware on the plane goes, for example, the airspeed, let's say there's an airspeed sensor, like a hardware. Well, we're really just dealing with the presentation of that information, right? But the actual aircraft manufacturer, probably for airspeed, they'll have like 3 different sensors. So that goes into our logic as well for our display, because we'll say, okay, we're getting airspeed information from 3 different places. So by default, just display the airspeed that's coming from sensor number 1. But we also need to double check that like 1, 2, and 3 agree, right? If sensor 1 is significantly different than sensor 2 and sensor 3, then we might need to throw out sensor 1 for being like garbage information, and then throw an error saying, hey, all your sensors don't work. Right? So that's why the logic gets a lot more complicated also.
I see. Okay. Interesting. Did you create any software systems that needed to be legally protected from other competitor companies stealing your idea?
Yeah, I think just through the course of my work and some of the new innovative things that we did as a team, it gave us the opportunity to file for property or protection of intellectual property. So that manifests itself in a couple different ways. Most people have probably heard of patents, but there's other protections for intellectual property as well. There's trade secrets, there's like company secrets. So they're all slightly different in some ways, because a patent provides protection for your idea, but it also discloses to the world what your idea is. So it's a double-edged sword in that sense, because the patent allows for protection of your idea, preventing legally anyone from taking it, but now they also know what you're doing, right? Versus if it's a company secret, then the company never discloses how they actually do something. But on the flip side, so in that sense, other people don't know how something is being done. But on the flip side, they could organically create that same thing, and then they're allowed to do that because it's not protected under patent. So there's entire teams in a lot of companies that, as an engineer, when you file for intellectual property protection, you basically say, hey, I think that we have something that's new and we want to bring it up to you.
Yeah.
And they'll say, okay, cool. And then they'll review it and they'll decide, okay, well, we're going to file this for a patent actually, versus no, we're going to keep this as a trade secret. So from an engineer perspective, you're incentivized to just disclose things you did to your company representatives. And you say, hey, like, I'd like to file this. And at least the way it worked in our company, like if you brought up something as an innovation, then they'll give you some money for it and say, thanks for bringing this up. And then they'll internally decide whether they want to file it as a patent or keep it as a trade secret, etc. And so if it ends up being filed as a patent, you get more money for giving them that. So the way it works is, in a company setting, I am credited as the inventor for certain things, but I don't own the patent. The company owns the patent.
Oh,
so the company is the owner of the patents, but I'm listed as an inventor along with some of my coworkers as well. So
got it. Okay. What was the most surprising part of the process of getting a patent?
it's long.
It's long.
It is so long. We filed our patents, I think, when I was still an intern, actually, because it was a lot of work that we'd already developed when I was an intern. And we submitted it to our company. Then the patent lawyers get together and they figure out how they're going to craft the patent application. And then once they're done crafting that, they'll show it to us, the inventors, and say, does that all look okay? And you look through it and you dig through all these legalese and you say, I guess.
Yeah.
And then you give your approval. And then they then file it with the government, the USPTO, US Patent and Trademark Office, I think.
Yeah.
And then it just goes into an abyss. And you're like, I don't know what's going on. And that's why you see all these different products out there. It'll say patent pending.
Yeah.
Because they have filed their patent. And then, so I think the way it works is you file your patent, and then about like 6 months to a year later, your patent gets published, which means that, your patent application gets published.
Okay.
Which means that whatever you submitted gets uploaded on their like database.
Yeah.
But you still don't have a patent yet. You've just applied for it. And then the government takes their time and they review the patents applications, and they look at all the things you cited, because you're supposed to cite like similar ideas and you're supposed to prove how yours is different. And I think they do their own due diligence to make sure that this doesn't already exist and it's unique enough and blah, blah, blah. And then finally, they will eventually award you a real patent.
Oh.
And I think start to finish, it took like 3 or 4 years.
Really?
It took a long time. Like I filed all this stuff like in 2021-ish, I think.
Yeah.
And I think I was awarded patent for one of them. I was awarded like last year, and the other one I was awarded like this year.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it is quite a long, like it takes years for you to actually get the patent itself.
And then does the company pay you once a patent officially gets like approved and distributed, or is it once you actually file the patent, that's when the company pays you?
It just depends on the company you're with, I think. At least the way that my company did it. Originally, they did it such that they would give you money just for submitting something. And say, thanks for submitting this. And then they would give you money if they decide that they're going to file it as a patent, because they could also decide that they're going to do nothing. They're like, this is useless, so I don't, we're not going to waste our time with anything.
Yeah.
They could decide they're going to keep it as a company secret,
Yeah.
in which case they'll give a different sum of money for
Yeah.
a company secret, and then it just kind of dies there.
Okay.
Or they say, let's file a patent,
Yeah.
and so for filing the patent, they give you some money, and then when the patent is approved, you get some more money.
Yeah.
I think for me, they changed the model, and they eventually just, the last compensation you got was when they decided that they were going to go through with the patent.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
So once they filed the patent application, like that's the last round of money that I get for being an inventor. And then after that, I think my coworkers who stuck around in the company, they would get a plaque or something with the patent on it to frame on their wall.
Yeah.
And I think if I was still working there, I might have gotten a copy of that plaque.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I'm not there, they don't give it to me.
Interesting. 'Cause I have like a lot of friends at big tech companies, Microsoft, Apple, Tesla, and a lot of them have patents. And it's really cool to see because it's almost like you're an inventor of this like interesting piece of technology that you're able to exclude other companies from working on. I personally have not been able to be awarded a patent just yet, but hopefully one day it would be really cool to be a part of that as well.
I think it's cool from a cloud perspective for sure, just
Yeah.
because you're like, wow, I have this legal document saying I invented something.
Yeah.
Now, as far as like it's always kind of interesting to me when I look back at the patents I have about how like relevant and applicable it really is, because it's such a niche thing. Like I don't think any Joe Schmo on the street can look at my patent and be like, wow, that's cool, you invented that. Like
What's one of your patents?
it's like so I worked a lot with aeronautical charts, specifically taking like aeronautical charts and rendering it on the actual electronic displays in the cockpit.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of it was like a lot of geospatial projection algorithms and stuff.
Yeah.
So what that means is like when you take a map, it's a 2D representation of the globe, which is 3D. So the way a map works is it projects the 3D information into a 2D space.
Okay.
So like when you go on Google Maps, you might notice that certain things specifically around the poles are a lot bigger than they actually are.
Yeah.
So like, there's a lot of things that I think like Africa is actually smaller. I'm butchering this, but it's like certain things look smaller on a map than they really are, and other things look bigger on a map than they really are in real life.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because of the projection algorithm that they're using. So Google Maps specifically uses the Mercator projection, which is like the most common projection algorithm.
Okay.
And it's essentially like taking that 3D globe and flattening it onto a like 2D rectangle.
Okay.
Right? And the globe is not a rectangle. Even if you like peel off the globe, like you're peeling off an orange, you would get orange slices that are like different shapes if you put it on a 2D space, right?
Yes.
But Google Maps is a rectangle. It's, so it's not preserving the exact dimensions of what real life objects are, I guess. And no projection is perfect. Actually, if you look at the most accurate projection, it looks very different than what you would imagine a map to be.
Yeah.
Anyway, why this is relevant is because there are different projection algorithms that are used to make aeronautical charts as well. Different ways that 3D slice of the globe is placed onto a 2D rectangle.
Yeah.
So like there's polar projections, there's Mercator projections, I'm forgetting the other ones, but essentially we leverage that information to render it on the actual electronic screen itself. And we did some of our own like modifications a little bit to put that information there in a manner that was easy to use for a pilot. And easy to navigate. So that's kind of what my patents involve, is kind of the interplay of that stuff.
This is a much different line of work than maybe what you're doing currently. This was back when you were a software engineer, the aerospace industry. Do you miss anything from being a software engineer, from being in the aerospace industry? Is there any big perks, anything about your day-to-day that you don't get to do now that you're in med school?
Well, I guess the most obvious thing is that I was in a job and now I'm in school, right? So it's very different environments, on one you're getting paid to do work and the other one you're paying money to do work. So, somewhat facetiously, there's that glaring difference.
Fair.
As far as the actual industries themselves, they're so very different, I think, in many ways. Both from the day-to-day, the culture of the people, So things like that are very different. I think working in kind of a corporate environment is very different than working in a medical world.
Yeah.
And it's exacerbated by the fact that it's also school. So it's like being back in college again.
Yeah.
So are there things that I miss about it? Yeah, I would say so, like certain things. I like the work that I was doing.
Yeah.
I thought it was very intellectually stimulating, but there was also a lot of things that I didn't get in terms of fulfillment from the job, which is part of the reason why I left.
Okay.
To actually full send pursue medical school.
Okay.
So, really, for me, like engineering was a lot of individual contribution, where it requires a lot of thought and It's very intellectually stimulating, but at the end of the day, you're working independently for most of it.
Okay.
You collaborate with people, sure, but it's a lot of like you're sitting down and working by yourself. And engineers that I saw later in their career progress in almost one of two paths, I feel like. On one hand, people become like people managers, and on the other hand, they become like subject matter experts.
Yeah.
So you can either like go deep into your technical world where you go dive deep into one area of expertise, and then now you're the guy for that particular thing, a subject matter expert, a SME.
Yeah.
Or on the other hand, you kind of take the big picture viewpoint and you become like a people manager type role. And that's kind of where I saw people progress like later on in their career. And honestly, neither of those really appealed to me. I didn't want to become a people manager, but at the same time, I didn't like this very tunnel visioned expert in one thing, but not knowledgeable in another thing, like very siloed.
Yeah.
And I think I had this unique opportunity as a new grad kind of person to take on a broad set of technical work and not get siloed into one thing. But I knew that, if I really wanted to pursue technical stuff deep into my career, I would have to focus in on one thing, and then I would become the expert on that one thing.
Yeah.
So neither of those options really appealed to me, and I always had the medical school in the back of my head, so that's what kind of pushed me to really just go for it.
Would you say you're more fulfilled now in your day-to-day in med school than you were when you were a software engineer, than when you were an undergraduate student studying aerospace engineering? What phase of your life do you think you're the most fulfilled versus, or even what phase of life were you the most stressed? I'm just kind of curious how you would contrast.
I would say that medical school is challenging, like extremely challenging. It is not easy. I think just in general, like it is a lot of work. It's a lot more work than I did when I was working.
Yeah.
Wow. And it is also like a different type of knowledge compared to engineering. Engineering is very like application based, like deriving formulas and stuff. Like you're not memorizing large quantities of information.
Yeah.
Medical school is very much like you're memorizing a lot of information.
Yeah.
And it's like you know it or you don't.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. And it is like systems based, like there are things that interplay, but at the end of the day, like people name certain proteins interesting names. They'll be like, RAF and RAS. Like they make no sense, It's just what someone decided to name it, and you have to know the name.
Yeah.
And so that's memorization, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a different challenge like that. Fulfillment wise, definitely, because I think what fulfills me is interacting with people, and so when I'm in clinic talking to patients, I find that very fulfilling. And I think that is the fulfillment that I didn't get in my engineering work.
Okay.
So right now as a student, I'm not exposed to it as much because I'm still learning, but I think in my career for sure, I'm going to be fulfilled because that's, I think, what drives me and energizes me.
That makes a lot of sense. If you had to rank your fulfillment between undergrad, software engineering, med school is number one. What about those other two?
It's hard to say. It's hard to think about what defines fulfillment because all three of those are such different experiences.
Yeah.
And at different stages of my life also, right? Like undergraduate it is kind of that phase of life where you have no stakes.
Yeah.
And you can also discover yourself.
Yeah.
You can pursue whatever you want without much consequences, just in terms of like being an adult.
Yeah.
Like responsibility wise and things like that. Like a lot of things are taken care of for you in college. That's kind of the sandbox of college, I think.
Yeah.
Working as an engineer is like I'm an adult in the real world going to work, right?
Yeah.
And so that is a different stage of life. Medical school is in some ways a regression back to college, but also not, right? It's not undergraduate, it's like a graduate degree. So people are more advanced in their lives.
Yeah.
But it's still like I go to classes and I take exams and things like that. It's structured in that sense.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's hard to say. I don't know if I can answer that truly because
Fair.
there's different aspects of each of those that were fulfilling and that I loved, and pros and cons to everything, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I don't even know how I would answer that myself. I mean, when you're working, I think it is fulfilling knowing that you're making money. You have that like financial freedom and flexibility to like go on trips and spend stuff, go on kind of cool experiences.
Yeah.
But then I do miss the community I had when I was in school because you're like constantly surrounded by friends, classmates, you're constantly meeting people.
I think I resonate with that too.
Yeah.
While working, you have the work-life balance.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I didn't really have, I think, in medical school especially. It's hard to have work-life balance because you're in school. Even in undergrad, like there's no necessarily a separation between your work and life.
Yeah.
You know, your college is your life. That's your identity, is that
Yeah.
you're in undergrad, right?
Yeah.
And like you have your social circle and whatnot. And sure, you're not in classes 24/7, but also like you're in that environment, whether you want to or not. Versus work, it's like when you leave work, you're done.
You're
right?
done.
You have your life. You have your personal life, then you go to work, you have your professional life. And you know, some that might sort of overlap, but it's still two distinct kind of worlds
Yeah.
in many ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. But the community of it is the beauty of having everything together is when your work is your life, then you have a strong community because
Yeah.
you're around these people all the time.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. As someone in medical school who's about to become a doctor, do you ever plan on using ChatGPT when providing medical care to patients?
You know, let me just break something to you right now, Sid. I already have. It's not a question of whether it's going to be in the future. No, it's an interesting question, I think, because there's so much prevalence of AI in our world now that, you know, you kind of stop to think, who is using AI like in the world right now? And recently I just saw a story about one of my old college professors who, I don't know if this was satirical or was real, but it seemed plausible enough that one of the professors used ChatGPT to write like an exam, and the students were reading and they were like, wow, this like text is so superfluous and it just doesn't seem like a human wrote it. Yeah. And they were like, did you use AI? And he was like, no. And then they like ran it through the detector, which is, you know, could tell you, but is not foolproof in terms of detecting AI. But I think he eventually ended up confessing. So I don't know, it could be a satirical story, but I haven't vetted the accuracy of it. But as far as the medical world goes, there actually is a AI tool for medical professionals called Open Evidence that essentially is using like large language models like ChatGPT kind of interface, but it's rather searching like peer-reviewed publications and articles and sourcing information through that way. So supposedly it's, you know, more accurate, more there's greater fidelity to the information itself.
So this is like approved for use on patients.
Well, I guess it's, I don't know about use on patients, more so like if you're a medical professional and you're like, okay, I'm seeing these symptoms and it kind of reminds me of something, but let me just look up to remind myself what this rare disease is, or what do these constellation of symptoms correlate to? Because in the back of my mind, I feel like there is a correlation between these things that I'm seeing and what is that exactly. And you know, you could Google it, but you can also go to Open Evidence and say, hey, I've got a patient that, you know, fits these symptoms. What is that again? And then, you know, it'll be like, oh, you might be thinking of this disease. And by the way, here are some peer-reviewed articles about this disease where you can refresh your knowledge. Or conversely, maybe you're in clinic and you see someone with a particular set of symptoms and you're like, okay, I think it's this disease that's going on. Let me remind myself, what is the treatment for that disease? Because sometimes treatments change because we find better drugs to treat certain diseases, or maybe we realize that there's more side effects to a particular drug than a different one, so therefore it's better to use that other one. So the guidelines and things like that are always changing, and so a tool like Open Evidence can help you refresh yourself on what those guidelines are, or maybe educate yourself on what new research has gone on into that, so that you can better treat your patients.
Oh wow, okay. This is my first time hearing about Open Evidence, so very cool to hear.
I know a lot of people in my medical school do use it, you know, for that purpose, even as students, you know, to learn more about certain things, maybe because like traditionally, if you wanted to learn more about something, you would seek out peer-reviewed publications, research relevant to that, and Open Evidence is in some ways just a way to leverage AI to find those same publications just a little bit faster, and you can get summaries that AI is, you know, browsing through the, you know, 50-page article and taking out snippets that might be relevant to exactly what you're wondering about.
Well, today do doctors use Google to search publications to get more insight as to whether the patients that they have might be experiencing symptoms that they relate to a disease they find online, or is Google not really, I guess, a reliable or commonly used tool for doctors today?
I'm sure doctors today definitely use all the resources they have. I think Google in itself is not reliable or unreliable necessarily. It's how you use it and what you're looking up. If you're going on, I guess the classic example is like growing up, teachers would always be like, you're not allowed to use Wikipedia to do stuff. Well, people use Wikipedia anyway. And honestly, I feel like today, I seldom hear anyone say that Wikipedia is unreliable, because so many people use Wikipedia now that even if there's some inaccurate information that's posted on Wikipedia, it'll probably be scrubbed instantaneously by someone else who's perusing that and saying that's not right. And there's citations to Wikipedia and whatnot. So I feel like in the last 20 years, Wikipedia has turned from like this unreliable source that no one should ever use to like the standard, essentially, right? So I think it all depends on how you use Google. I mean, I think in probably the tech world and stuff, like, if you're coding, do you not use Stack Overflow? And it's like, you're not necessarily ripping Stack Overflow blindly. You're looking at Stack Overflow, looking at what's been implemented there and saying, how does that relate to what I'm trying to do? And then use that to jumpstart your own, thought process. And so I think it's a tool. I'm sure physicians use it because there's a lot of people that maybe come in with very rare diseases that they're not necessarily familiar with, right? And it's only human to not have unlimited knowledge. Like, we're not robots. And so we don't have boundless knowledge. We're always learning. And so I think a good physician is probably leveraging all their resources to make sure that they're best prepared to take care of the patients that they see.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you have any concerns or not even concerns, do you foreshadow all these tools becoming so powerful, whether they're AI tools or other types of technology, to the point where the job of a doctor becomes obsolete because these tools can almost replace the functionalities or capabilities that doctors are doing today? Or do you think they'll always be like supplemental tools instead of replacing those jobs?
I think it depends maybe on the function of what the doctor is doing. I think with any kind of technology, it's hard to foresee how that's truly going to impact something. But I think if we can take prior advancements as maybe a foundation for what we might predict AI will turn the field of medicine into, like when the internet and Google and stuff came out, like doctors didn't get obsolete. Just because WebMD.com exists, right, and patients read that all the time, doesn't necessarily mean they still don't take the advice of physicians. And they just don't visit their doctor anyway. Sure, they might go into their doctor's office and say, hey, I read up on WebMD that maybe this rash that I've had for 2 hours is cancer. And then the doctor would say, no, I don't think it's cancer. Please stop worrying. Right? But I don't necessarily think it's going to replace medicine entirely. I think maybe there's some functions of medicine that'll optimize and render obsolete, but I don't think as a field as a whole it's going to obliterate the field. I think people are still going to want to go up to a human that they trust, right, to get medical advice and take care of them. I think no matter how far technology comes, it's never going to replace that human touch, I think. And I think a lot of medicine, honestly, is that subtle interaction and the trust that people place in the doctor themselves, right? Now, certain functions like note writing, for example, a big burden on physicians today is like the amount of documentation that they have to do. Like, they see a patient for 10 minutes, but they end up spending 30 minutes writing a note. It seems like it should be the other way around, right? At least to me. But AI has kind of infiltrated that space a little bit, and there are these AI dictation tools that I'm seeing a lot of physicians use, where they'll bring some kind of recording device into the room, and it's powered by AI, where it's listening to the conversation in real time between the doctor and the patient, and it's generating a note based on that conversation. So the physician walks out of the room, and it's basically captured all the information that you would need in your note. And the physician can like look at it real quick and vet that all the information is how they want it, and then they're done.
Yeah.
rather than having to, like currently the system is, you go see your patient, you come out, and then you type everything up either by hand or you've got like a dictation mic. That's just a simple voice to text tool. But now, like increasingly, these other tools are coming out that's powered by AI, where it's just listening to the conversation and then generating the note based on that.
Okay, I like that.
So I think it's nice in the sense that now, like, you reduce the administrative burden and you can use that time instead to like actually have FaceTime with the patient and what medicine I think should be.
Yeah.
So I think that is a positive, probably aspect of AI in the medical world.
Yeah. And in that example, you're not replacing a doctor, you're just making the manual burden of note taking a lot faster.
Yeah.
They can hopefully treat more patients that way. So I do like that example. I think, and I do agree, I think the human touch is probably really valuable. If I'm getting an expensive surgery done, I don't know if I trust AI to take care of all the logistics. I think having that human oversight would make me feel more comfortable before getting anything really seriously done on me.
And I think that goes true for a lot of things in our society that can be automated or purely technologically driven, yet we as a society choose to not give up the entirety of that control over to machines. We still want like a human overseeing things.
Yeah.
Like cars, for example, like self-driving cars, like Tesla still makes you like touch the steering wheel or something. Like you can't just fall asleep and let the car drive itself. Like we haven't decided as a society that that's a control that we want to give up yet.
Yeah.
I think the same goes true for airplanes. Like you can have autopilot fly most of it, but I don't think anyone would get on a plane that didn't have pilots on board.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
At least not yet. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Has your experience in aerospace engineering and as a pilot influenced your perspectives or even your skills in the medical world at all, or have they been more distinct fields that have contained less overlap than maybe you would have thought?
I think from a technical standpoint, there's not a lot of overlap. I can argue that there is, like, sort of, like, there's a little bit of discussion with, like, blood flow and stuff. And a lot of aerospace engineering is, like, fluid dynamics. That's what I took a lot of classes on. So
Yeah.
blood is a fluid and it flows through our body. So, I mean, there is, like, so they bring up some equations, and it's kind of funny because each equation and formula has certain assumptions that are associated with it.
Yeah.
And these lecturers are not physicists or engineers, and they're, like, bringing up these equations, and I'm like, I don't know if that really holds for blood, but it's like good enough. So that's what an engineer is, right? It's like, this isn't exactly true, but it's good enough, so we'll just roll with it.
Yeah.
I think that was a lot of, like, in engineering classes and stuff, you make a lot of assumptions and you round numbers and things because you're just like, if it's close enough, then we're fine.
Yeah.
Nothing is exact. So I think from a technical standpoint, no, not really.
What about between tech and medicine? Anything you learned in your tech field that you want to apply in the medical world?
I think just the skills that I have, like, for example, coding is like a good skill to have, just like writing is a good skill to have.
Yeah.
If I wanted to innovate something or develop a tool to optimize my workflow, I have the skills to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's valuable. I don't know what I would do necessarily at this moment in time, but I'm sure at some point in my career, and for anyone's career, they'll be there and they'll be like, wow, this is like very repetitive and monotonous. Why can't I make this better?
Yeah.
And if I ever feel that way, then I'll think, well, how can I make this better? How can I automate this or, optimize this flow?
Yeah.
And I could write something up in code.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as far as the hard skills go, I don't know if there's a lot of overlap, but I think going through this whole process is giving me perspective in med school also, just having had a job beforehand in a field that's different than medicine, because what I often find is people in medicine are kind of consumed by the field. It is so long and drawn out and hard to go become a doctor that you're inevitably get surrounded in this echo chamber for a large part of your life.
Yeah.
And like a lot of people go into undergrad as like a pre-med. They'll study biology or chemistry or something relevant to the medical field. They'll go straight into medical school. And so like you've essentially finished high school and you've like been engrossed in this world only your entire time for maybe the better part of a decade, and then you graduate and you become a doctor and you go into the real world, right?
Yeah.
But you've only been surrounded in this one space.
Yeah.
And I think having my perspective of being in this other world as well, other worlds perhaps, just has given me perspective that only enriches my experience, I think.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I like that. I mean, honestly, like life is very short, right? So it is very admirable when I see people dedicate their entire lives to one profession. But I also think it's very enriching and fulfilling if you're able to have a diversity and variety of interests as well. And that way you never will have that regret, like, oh, what if I had never pursued engineering or being a pilot? You can kind of say I've experienced everything. And so, yeah, I think it's really awesome how you've chosen to live the last several years.
Yeah, it's interesting, like looking at the demographic of my medical school class, you have a wide variety of people. You have people who have gone straight through college and they're in medical school, and they're very young, which is an advantage, right? They'll finish and they'll be a lot younger than some of the other people in the class. You also have people who are like a lot older, like people in their 30s or 40s, that are pursuing it as a second career. And it's interesting to see both sides of that. I'm probably somewhere in the middle, right, of both of these groups. But you see the perspectives and that each of them bring, and you can see the contrast for sure.
Yeah.
People who are older in life and have worked another career will approach medical school and the field of medicine with that different perspective compared to people who have been in that path forever.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense.
Not necessarily good or bad either way. I think it's
Yeah.
just a different perspective to things, and pros and cons to both.
Yeah. What is, like, now that you're in med school, what does your day-to-day look like now that, you know, you're no longer writing code, working in the aerospace industry?
It's a lot of studying for sure.
Okay.
Medical school is subdivided into different phases. So there's like a classroom phase where you're learning a lot of theoretical stuff. There's like a practical phase where you're actually in the hospital, like seeing patients in a controlled, supervised environment, learning in that sense. So it just kind of depends. Like right now, I'm in the clinical phase, so I don't really have as many classroom lectures. It's more so I actually go to work in some ways, like to a clinic or to the hospital, see patients, you know, a lesser volume than a full-fledged doctor would, but in a supervised manner also. So I would kickstart those thought processes on, like, you know, if I'm seeing someone in the clinic, like what are the things that I need to do, and then just kind of practice there, and then pitch my plan and things like that to my supervisors, who would then give me feedback and say, yeah, let's roll with that, or actually, have you thought about this? Maybe we should do this first.
Are you talking to real patients or okay?
Yeah. So you know, like for example, let's say a doctor, like I'm working with a doctor in the clinic, and he sees 25 patients in a day. I'm not going to see 25 patients. He'll give me like 4.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But for each of those 4 patients, I'll take ownership and practice, you know, like actually get all the information from them, figure out what they need and what they want, and then propose a plan of action. And then I have my doctor as like a supervisor, essentially, to cross-check and make sure that it's appropriate.
Is he in the room with you, or is she in the room with you?
Usually the flow goes is that I'll go see, if it's a clinic environment, I'll go see the patient myself.
Yeah.
I'll come out and then I'll present it to the doctor and say, this is the information I've gathered.
Yeah.
This is my thought process.
Yeah.
This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then he'll give me feedback and say, okay, based on what you've said, I think that's appropriate,
Yeah.
probably. And then we'll both go in together, and then he'll talk again and then be like, okay, I got this information from my student.
Yeah.
Does that all sound about right?
Yeah.
And maybe they'll be like, oh, actually, sorry, I forgot this other thing, by the way, also. And then they'll say, okay, well, this is what we're thinking of doing.
So the patients know going in that you're a student?
Yeah, and they have the opportunity to decline also.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But in a teaching environment, anytime you go to like a university hospital, you're almost guaranteed to interface with students.
Makes sense.
And that's kind of what you sign up for when you go to like a university hospital.
Yeah.
But patients always have the option to decline and say, I don't want this. I think it only enriches it because you have the opportunity as a patient to give your story to multiple different people who all have multiple different thought processes, and they're all working together for you. So it's kind of nice. You get like a 2-for-1 essentially.
Yeah, makes sense. Interesting. Okay, so right now you have a mix of studying, maybe memorizing information, as well as some like socializing, you're interacting with patients.
Right.
And before it was more of just the studying, less interaction with patients.
Yeah, generally speaking, the first half of your medical education, medical school, usually about the first half is like all theoretical knowledge.
Yeah.
You go to like lectures. It's like undergrad a lot. You go to lectures, you learn information, you take exams, rinse and repeat. and then you progress to the kind of the clinical phase, which is more hands-on, and you rotate through different specialties.
Okay.
So it's about a year of rotating through what they call the core specialties. Like everyone is required to see those specialties, like surgery, for example. Like even if you don't want to be a surgeon, you still need to do rotation in surgery.
Interesting. Okay.
OBGYN or family practice, pediatrics, like all these things, like every medical student will go through that, even if they will never do that again.
Interesting. Well, do you know what specialty you want to do?
I want to do family practice.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a lot of clinic. It's like your general doctor, essentially, is what it is.
What inspired that decision?
It's a very versatile field.
Yeah.
It's kind of what I learned, just going through stuff. Like, once again, kind of going back to my motivations as an engineer, what really turned me off from being a subject matter expert was that I would be siloed off in this one specific area where, granted, I would have so much depth of knowledge that I would be considered an expert in that field, but also that's at the sake of everything else in some ways. It's like depth versus breadth. And for me, I like the jack of all trades kind of thing. I like knowing about a lot of different things. And that's kind of what family practice is. It's the generalist in many ways. That you have broad knowledge versus a specialist is very deep in that one area. So, if I go to a cardiologist, a heart specialist, and I'm like, hey, my back hurts, they'll be like, sorry, I can't help you. Because that's not their field, right? As a family doctor, you never actually are able to say that. You can't be like, I can't help you, because you are the stop. Like you are the person who's supposed to figure it out. And I don't know, I really like that. I always hated during my clinical rotations just being like, I'm sorry, like, I can't help you with that. Right? It's like patients have taken all this time to come to me. It's hard, right? Like going to the doctor is not easy, especially for a lot of people. They have to take time off work at the risk of maybe even being fired in certain jobs. It's a time commitment. You have to get yourself there. It's hard, and then you only come up there and you're like, okay, I have these 5 problems, and they're like, sorry, I can't help you. Go to someone else. I it didn't sit well with me, and I don't have to do that as a family doctor. But also, the other aspect of it is it's versatile in that there are different areas and specializations you can go into, but it doesn't have to define your career. So, for example, a cardiologist will be a cardiologist for their whole career. Versus as a family doctor, you get trained in a lot of different areas. For example, you get training in your standard like clinic stuff. You see patients for annual physicals, sports physicals. Oh, I've got a cold. Can you help me out, doc? Like that kind of stuff, clinical stuff. In a lot of places, they'll also work in the hospital, like admit patients, round on their patients who are admitted, figure out how to progress them from admitted to the hospital to feeling better. In a lot of places, they might work at an ER also, just because they have broad fund of knowledge that they can work in an ER. Family doctors get training in a lot of obstetrics, so that's like pregnancy care, delivering babies and things like that. That's something that family doctors do. So honestly, it's a versatile field, and there's a lot of areas you get trained in and a lot of different environments that you can work in. And I find that appealing because throughout my career, I can shift and pivot. I don't have to say for the next 40 years of my career, I'm going to work 9 to 5, 5 days a week in a clinic. I can say, well, initially I want to do some pregnancy care and deliveries, which is a lot of variable hours because babies don't deliver during business hours, unfortunately. Sometimes they deliver at 3 a.m. And so you have a lot of like on-call and things like that. Like your life gets disrupted, which sounds okay right now, but I don't necessarily want that to be my life for 40 years. When I'm younger and more energetic, maybe I can accept that. But then I can say, like, a few years down the line, a decade down the line, I could say, well, I'm not going to do pregnancy care anymore. That's okay. I'm just going to do clinic. And so I like that versatility. Like within this specialization, I have the ability to pivot my career in different directions, which is not necessarily possible in other specialties, especially the super specialized ones. It's like you're locked in. Like a neurosurgeon, like you're kind of locked into that life, right? Like if someone's brain's gonna explode or something, like you have to be there. That's what you have to do. And if it's 1 a.m., then that's what you're gonna do. And so Yeah, there's some considerations I think that are interesting.
With general practice, you will have like a 9 to 5. You can log off at 5 p.m. You don't have to be on call.
It just depends on how your practice operates. And there's a lot of negotiability when you're actually working. So like I know a lot of doctors, they'll actually only work like 4 days a week. So they'll work 4 days of clinic and they'll see like a certain amount of patients in that day. And you can also set and say how many patients you want to see in a day. You can set your appointment length, which will then dictate how many patients you see. So I've seen appointments scheduled in intervals as short as like 15 minutes to as long as like 30 minutes. So it just kind of depends. Like if you see one patient every 30 minutes, you're going to see less during the day than if you see one every 15 minutes. But then maybe perhaps one could argue your quality of time with that patient is influenced also by that. But once again, like if you're in a clinic environment, probably most likely it'll be like 9 to 5. Although I have seen like some clinics, they'll have maybe 1 day a week where they'll have like a 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. thing so that people who are working can come after work and schedule appointments, right? Or they might have like a half day on a weekend. Just that practice might have that concept just to allow for more flexibility for patients to like actually come. Because if we have it during business hours, then people are taking time off.
Like, I'm curious if you're familiar at all with the financial incentives when it comes to running a hospital. Is it in the best financial interest of doctors to try to schedule as many appointments as possible? Does that mean more money for the hospital? Does that mean more money for the doctors or anything like that, or not necessarily?
Yeah, there are certain. It depends on how you're paid. Well, as far as a hospital standpoint goes, so if you're running a hospital is making money based on the services they provide. Okay, and services include procedures, surgeries, office procedures like maybe administering a shot, seeing patients, like all of these are what brings revenue to the hospital. Okay, and the way that revenue is it's pretty standardized. There's this whole like industry called billing, hospital billing, which like there are certain codes for like each service that's provided. So like office visit, there's actually like 5 levels of office visit, and I don't understand it completely either. But there's certain requirements that determine what level of visit. So if you go to your doctor, you may get billed they may bill that visit as a level 2 visit versus like a level 5 visit. Just depends on maybe the complexity of what you're having to do, the amount of decision making the doctor has to do, maybe like other things that they did to you, like maybe they gave you an injection or something like that. Like it just depends. There's certain things. Maybe you came in and you had like 5 different chronic things going on that we had to like juggle and balance. I don't know. There's certain requirements. It's all like you can Google it. I think it's like the Medicare billing codes or whatever.
Okay.
But a lot of it is Medicare because a lot of patients everyone above 65 has Medicare, and that's where a lot of money is coming for the hospital. So Medicare kind of determines all of these like billing things.
Okay.
And then so the hospital basically says, and then also it's all based on how the physician documents their work also. So like the physician basically has to document and say, I did all these things for it to be a level 4 visit. Right. Yeah. So like even if the physician did something but they didn't write in their note like certain keywords or whatever, then it's not a level 4 visit anymore. You can't prove that you actually did that stuff.
You're saying basically whatever the physician says is like the source of truth for what the visit is?
In some ways, yeah.
Okay. Would a physician ever like try to upsell you on like a surgery because they have some financial incentive to give you a surgery when maybe you don't need it?
No, that should never happen.
Okay.
Because the thing is that the physician is not directly necessarily benefiting from what they're billing. So this is the way the U.S. medical system works, right? Is that what I'm talking about right now has nothing to do with physicians.
Yes.
And actually nothing to do with patients either. Right now what I'm talking about is the interaction between hospitals and insurance companies. Okay. So this is how the hospital is generating gross revenue, and the money it's collecting is not coming from patients, it's coming from insurance companies. So the hospital says, okay, my employee, Dr. blah, 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 bills your insurance company for a level 4 office visit under this particular code. And the insurance company says, okay, based on the documentation I see here, you qualify for a level 4 visit, I agree.
Okay.
Here's your money for a level 4 visit.
Okay.
So the insurance company has now given money to the hospital.
Yeah.
Okay. neither of these directly influence how much the patient pays or how much the physician makes.
Okay. Okay.
So let's talk about the physician first, right?
Yeah.
How is the physician making money? Well, there's two ways. There's different models as to how physician compensation works. One is just salary. So you say you make this much a year. Okay, cool. I could see 50 patients. I could see 20 patients. It doesn't really matter. I make the same amount. Okay. More commonly is this production based thing called revenue value units, RVUs. This is like an industry term where essentially whatever you do in the clinic is associated with a certain amount of RVUs. So if I see you for an annual physical, that may be like 2 RVUs. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, right? So if I do 10 annual physicals today, I've now racked up 20 RVUs. Okay. And basically at the end of the year, you add up all your RVUs and you say, how many total RVUs do I have?
Okay.
And the way your salary will work is like, it'll be like you make this much floor as long as you put up this many RVUs, up to this many RVUs. So up to like 5,000 RVUs, this is how much you make a year. If somehow you really hustle and you make more than that, for each additional RVU you make, you will get this incremental extra money.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what incentivizes someone who sees maybe 10 patients a day versus someone who sees 30 patients a day. They're working a lot harder, and so therefore they deserve to be compensated more. And this is kind of how that levels out as a playing field.
Makes sense.
So that's like the production-based thing. So one could argue that in that system, there is probably some incentive to see more patients. But I don't think it necessarily compromises quality, because if it did, it would blow up in the physician's face. Because if you're not providing quality care, then you're not getting outcomes. And like RVUs and stuff, they're also dependent on like, there's also other metrics that you have to hit, for example. So it's like out of your, like, let's say there's a guideline for the flu shot, right? And it's like out of your patient panel, like 80% of your patients have received the flu shot.
Yeah.
If you hit that metric, then you get like a bonus or whatever.
Okay.
So it's not 100%, right? People can say, I don't want the flu shot. And you're like, okay, cool, right? And that's fine. So you don't have to like be pushing stuff. Like it's not like, oh, 99% of your patients need to get the flu shot. So you're like, oh, I really want that bonus. Like I'm gonna force you to get the flu shot, right? So there's different models. It's I don't know if there's a perfect system. There's sure. Can you game the system? Absolutely. You can game any system, I think.
Yeah.
Right? So are there people out there that are purely going off of the incentives that are there based on production and kind of turn your clinic into a factory?
Yeah.
Maybe. But if you're the patient in that and you felt like you're being used as part of a factory type setup, you might not feel that good, and you might not be incentivized to go see that doctor again.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I think there's enough checks and balances. Hopefully, you're not getting screwed over as a patient. I think the other thing to note is that just because a doctor is, let's say tripling the minimum RVUs that they need to hit because they're so efficient, and maybe they're billing patients for certain visits. Just because the physician bills a level 4 versus a level 2 visit doesn't mean that you're paying anything different. Because that is what determines what the hospital collects from the insurance company. What you pay is dependent on what your insurance plan is.
Yeah.
Right? Which also, there's just so much obscurity, I think that's why, because there's so many layers to this, and there's zero transparency.
Yeah.
Because nobody knows how much the insurance company is actually paying the hospital. Not the physicians, not the patients, no one. They have some like under the table like agreement essentially to say, because we're as a, what insurance company are doing business with you as a hospital, like this is how much we're actually going to pay you, take it or leave it, right?
Yeah.
And there's some kind of thing there. Your insurance premium is dependent on the type of policy you have, maybe your employer benefits, things like that. And then the physician pays not even based on how well they're, like just because the hospital is making $5,000, let's say, out of my 15-minute interaction with a patient, that's independent. Like the hospital can make $5,000, they can make $2,000. It doesn't really matter. For me, it's like 2 RVUs or whatever, right? Like for that annual physical. So I have no visibility as a physician as to how much money the hospital is extracting from the insurance company as a result of my services, because my agreement is with the hospital for it, and the hospital has basically said you will make this much money for each RVU.
Yeah. Yeah.
They could be collecting way more than that. They can be collecting less than that. That's the hospital's business side of things, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. It is an interesting topic because, as we're all aware, with Luigi Mangione killing the healthcare CEO, health insurance CEO, there seems to be a lot of resentment towards the current health insurance industry. Do you, by any chance, have any perspectives or insights on how the health insurance industry can be improved? Are there any big gaps that you noticed that we already haven't talked about already?
I think it's, the system we have is not efficient, right? And it's not working for a lot of people, clearly. Like, a lot of people don't have good insurance. Like, very recently, in recent events, like, a lot of people's insurance premiums are like tripling. They're paying a lot of money for healthcare. So I think there is places to improve in terms of improving our medical system. I don't think the problem, contrary to public opinion, is that doctors are like taking all this money. I think there's a lot of, it's just such a huge system. If you look at any city in the U.S. and you look at who the major employer is for any, like, go on Wikipedia and look up a random town in the U.S. And if you look at the major employers of that town, most likely the number one will be like Walmart,
Yeah.
and the number two will be a hospital.
Okay.
Hospital and healthcare is such a huge industry in the United States. Like, every small hospital, they employ a lot of people, a lot of administrators, nurses, doctors. Like, there's a lot more to a healthcare institution than just doctors. A lot of administrative overhead, like the receptionists that are scheduling people, the business side of things, the administration. So there's a lot, and it's a whole industry, right? And so, it's kind of akin in some ways to, like, if the price of an iPhone goes up, you're like, oh, like, the engineers are making more money, that's why my iPhone cost went up. Yeah, maybe, but also not really, right? Like, Apple could be pocketing more money. Maybe the cost of the materials went up, whatever, right? Like, so, not a perfect analogy, but I think there is a lot more at play. It's not just as simple as doctor makes money, patient pays money. You've got this insurance, first of all, that's there, that's as a middleman. And insurance's advantage, that proponents of health insurance would argue, is that it's a big negotiating tool, because insurance companies have so many subscribers that they can negotiate with hospitals and say, we will only pay you this much for this service. And if you, as a hospital, are not willing to take my offer, then all of my subscribers will not be using your hospital.
Let's say you're out of network or something like that.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And so they have that play where, if I'm a hospital, I'm now faced with either taking this money or losing 1,000 people.
Yeah.
Right, as my clients.
Yeah.
And so that's the negotiating power is supposed to be the advantage of insurance. Now, insurance in the U.S. is for profit, so they are beholden to shareholders, and they're obligated to maximize shareholder value, and so they have to turn profits and whatnot to inspire confidence, like any private company or public company, right, on the stock exchange these days. So, that is a profit-driven incentive, and one could argue that inspires, innovation and the capitalistic ideas, right? And so, yeah, sure, maybe, but is there, I guess, going back to your question, is there something to improve? Yeah, absolutely. I think we can look at models throughout the world. There's a lot of different models. People point to public healthcare. That is certainly a model. I think the German model is very interesting, because they have insurance companies there, but the insurance companies are nonprofit. So I think that's kind of interesting, because it takes away this whole shareholder thing out of the equation. It's like, they're still private institutions. They still have subscribers. They have negotiating power, but also they're not beholden to anyone except for their people that buy the insurance.
That makes sense.
Now, as far as scalability and stuff goes, I don't know, but I don't know. We'll have to see. It's obviously not a simple issue. Otherwise, it would have been solved by now.
Okay. So you're saying the solution might not be to I guess, murder all the healthcare insurance CEOs? And
Yeah, maybe
yeah,
not. I mean, it
yeah,
has been a while since Luigi killed off the United Healthcare CEO,
yeah,
and I arguably don't know if much has changed.
yeah, yeah,
So, is it effective? In my opinion, no.
yeah,
Because actually, I think healthcare premiums have gone up. So, I don't really think, I mean, I think it was like a sensational news moment for a while, but
yeah,
has it functionally affected anything in our healthcare system? No.
yeah. Do we know why healthcare insurance premiums have gone up?
Well, well, recently it's because of government subsidies that were subsidizing health insurance, and they're going away,
Got
right?
it.
And because
Okay.
of political issues that are going on and disagreements. Um, as far as why insurance premiums go up, it's a multifactorial thing, right? For an insurance company perspective, if they can charge more, then they probably will because they want to make money, right? If they have to pay out more to hospitals, then they have to recoup that money somewhere so that they can continue to show profits.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for an insurance company, if you look at it from a very simplistic view, their costs are paying hospitals and healthcare institutions, and their revenue is money they get from premiums, right? I mean, the money in is what they collect from subscribers,
Yeah.
and the money out is what they pay the hospitals.
Yeah.
So if they want to continue making money, either they pay out less
Yeah.
or they make more, or a combination of such, right? And
Yeah.
and I'm sure there's different things at play. Maybe hospitals are charging more for stuff
Makes sense.
because hospitals' own costs for stuff maybe are going up.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, we're going to charge more.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it from the hospital perspective now, their money in is the money they're getting from insurance companies for services. Their money out is salaries they pay, but also like money they have to pay to use a lot of the technology that's used. Like in a surgery, there's a lot of specialized instruments and things like that. A lot of those are use and throw because of sterility and things like that, infection control, that a lot of these specialized instruments, like you open it once and you use it in that surgery and that's it. And those cost a lot of money because they're very specialized engineered tools, like this whole biomedical industry. A lot of specialized tools exist for very specific surgeries, and they cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so the hospital's paying to use that, so they need to recoup the cost, so they'll probably charge the insurance company for that,
Yeah.
which is why a surgery probably costs so much.
A question I hate to ask, but I know a lot of people in the comments would love to know. So I'm curious about like the amount of money you've earned, how that's evolved over time. Is there anything you can speak to regarding how your compensation has evolved over the past several years?
Yeah, and that is kind of the interesting thing with medical salaries and things, because you go through a lot of schooling and you're paying a lot of money to go through a lot of schooling, and then you graduate and you become a resident doctor, which functionally, if you have an engineering perspective, a resident doctor is like an intern. It's like an engineering intern. You're like doing a lot of the same work that like a real engineer would do. You're pretty much doing the same thing a real engineer would do, except you're in a supervised environment and you're kind of like still learning, but it's like on the job training kind of.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what a resident is. Like you do everything that a real doctor does. In fact, you have a medical degree,
Yeah.
but you still have like another check just in case as you're still blossoming into and then once you finish residency, then there's no other checks. Like whatever you do is what ends up happening,
Yeah,
so you get the responsibility of that. But as a resident, your salary is actually fixed. It's very hierarchical, like a government job, because the salary for a resident is paid by the U.S. government. So a first year resident, it's like a standardized salary.
Yeah.
Now there's some minor adjustments, a few thousand here or there for cost of living and whatnot, but on balance, if you look at a first year resident salary anywhere in the U.S., it'll be about the same amount, plus or minus a couple thousand.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Has money influenced any of the decisions you made throughout your career, your educational journey at all, or not really?
It is a consideration, of course, right? Because I mean, it's important, and it drives how we function in society, right? You need money to do anything.
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, people still pay to go to college because it's an investment, and so, even though you're not making money, it's a calculation of opportunity cost of how much you're paying now. Like for example, if I actually grossly just look at how much money I would have made if I progressed as an engineer, over these 4 years, I've not only paid tuition, but I've also lost out on that potential there, right? And so, but I think like honestly, plus or minus, it'll even out in the long term. And that's really what it is at the end of the day. Is the short term variations will be blunted by the long term, and it'll all even out in the end.
Yeah, I agree. If you could go back in time to when you were in high school, maybe you're 15, 16 years old, you have the same interests. You want to pursue aerospace engineering, you want to be a pilot, maybe you want to pursue med school and be a software engineer somewhere in between there. Is there anything you would do differently? Is there any advice you would give your 15, 16-year-old self that has all these interests and passions?
I would probably do the exact same thing, honestly.
Okay.
The advice I would give is to worry a little bit less, maybe.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of uncertainty. I think every person going through any kind of professional journey, there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of investment. Like, even to become an engineer, you go through college. Well, when you're in high school, you're like tunnel vision. It's like, I have to get to college.
Yeah.
And then you're in college and you're like, I have to get a job now.
Yeah.
But then, you end up in your career and you're like, okay, I made it, kind of, right?
Yeah.
But as far as the exact path I took, I honestly don't know if I'd change it, because I've kind of done all the things I've wanted to do, and I think it's well-rounded me in terms of the experiences, and it's given me perspectives in different ways that I don't think any of the things I did necessarily has negatively impacted me.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that is the advice I'd probably give, is just pursue your passions and it'll all work out eventually. Maybe not in the way you expect. Like, if I was in high school and I would have never foreseen that I would end up in Iowa,
Yeah.
almost 10 years later. But that's just how it goes. So, be open to opportunities and pursue your dreams, and I think it'll work out one way or another. Maybe not in the way you expect exactly, because in high school, my structured plan was I was going to go to medical school right after undergrad. That's not how it worked. I had pretty much 2 years in between, give or take, and I don't think I would have expected I would be in Iowa. So
Yeah. I think that's great advice. And pursuing your passions is a lot of times harder than people might think, right? Because to be a pilot, you have to log hundreds of hours of pilot training and
yeah, it depends on the kind of pilot you want to be. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of different intermediate licenses and stuff, and
yeah, got it. Okay.
yeah, I'm not saying it's easy by any means, for sure,
Yeah.
right? It's not handed on a platter or given to you, but I think for anyone who is looking to pursue anything, if you want it badly enough, you'll find a way to do it.
Yeah.
And it might not be the way you expect,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to say it's all. There's a lot of luck involved. There's a lot of fortuitous opportunities that you might come across. So I think it's sometimes you have to ride the wave, though, because there's things you can control. You do your best to control them, and then there's things you don't, and so you just kind of have to be open to that uncertainty.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Makes a lot of sense. What advice do you think that other people in your industry give that is really bad?
Which industry?
I mean, if any of them come to mind, and whether, yeah.
Oh, man. I think, I don't know if this is a specific advice that was given, or maybe connotations thereof, but focusing too much on future earnings and average salaries, I think, is a pitfall you can fall into, because I think earnings and salary and things like that in any industry, whether it's in engineering or medicine, it's determined by a lot of different things. And it could be what company you join. It could be how well you negotiate your job interview. It could be where you're living, how much demand there is for the type of thing that you're doing. And so I think if you look at averages, it's a good benchmark as a starting point. But average is just that, right? 50% of the people are doing better than that average. And why can't you be one of those 50% of people?
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of keeping that in mind and saying, if I want to make this much money, how am I going to get myself there? And maybe it's, and it's from a bunch of different things also, right? Because like perhaps you want to live in somewhere very specific. That is one less negotiating power that you have, right? And so you're limited now to exploring opportunities in that specific region. So yeah, you're more beholden to salary, because maybe a different place would pay a lot more for the same job. So I think there's more to life than just salary, right? And I don't know if that's necessarily a specific advice that people gave is like to only look at money, but I think definitely going through any kind of training, you're looking a lot, especially in an industry like medicine where you have so much investment that you've already given in, is people are really hyper focused in some ways on like their earnings potential.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. So I think that issues definitely in like the tech space as well. Everyone's trying to like maximize their total comp, jump ship to different companies. But after a point, I don't know how much that number really influences your life in any way.
Yeah, I think there is some kind of diminishing returns. Sure, you want money to pay off your debts and have a good life and provide for your family or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And achieve your dreams. But there is a point where I think like an incremental, let's say 20K increase from here to here is more meaningful than an incremental 20K increase from here to here. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And at some point, I think there are things that are more valuable than money. Perhaps like maybe your work-life balance, maybe where you're living or working. So I think there's just other things to consider in addition to your salary and compensation.
If money didn't matter, what would you do?
That's tough. I don't think I would be one of those people who says I just like do nothing, because I'm the kind of person who just get bored.
Yeah.
So quite honestly, like even if I didn't have to work a day in my life, I'd probably do something, because I don't think I could, like, it would be fun to sit idly for maybe a month and then I'd just get bored.
Yeah.
So honestly, I'd probably do, I think I find a lot of fulfillment in being a doctor. At least, what I've done so far, and it's been great. So I would probably continue to do that. If I didn't have to work as much, maybe I would scale back, perhaps, like not saying that my work-life balance is not going to be great in my career. I'm going to make sure it is, right? But maybe I'd say, okay, you know what? Instead of working 5 days a week, I'll work 4 days a week or 3 days a week because I can.
Yeah.
Maybe. Maybe I'd pursue my hobbies more. But I think I'd still do something. I wouldn't just do nothing. And it'd probably be similar to what I actually want to do in my career. And I think that's how it should be for most people, right? Like, it's like, I think delayed gratification is important. Like, it is important to hold out and maybe restrain yourself a little bit in the pursuit of something in the future, but that's not how you want to always live your life. Like, if you get to a point where you're only doing things for the sake of doing them, then maybe you need to rethink of why you're doing that. And quite honestly, I think for me, it's like, I want to do things that fulfill me. Sure, yeah, I'm making money and all that, and I have that luxury of saying that, but even if I had all the money in the world, I'd probably do something similar to what I want to do, because that's what fulfills me.
Yeah. I think that's a good spot to be in life, when you're not doing it for the money, you're doing it because it fulfills you.
Yeah, exactly.
What are you currently working on? What's next for you in these next 6 months to a year that you're looking forward to?
Sure. I mean, I'm still kind of in the depth of medical school. So there's some licensing examinations that are like standardized tests that I have to take. So that's kind of what's going forward. And then I'll be applying to residency pretty soon. So kind of figuring out where I want to take the next phase of my training, and looking forward to that. Got it.
Okay. And I guess kind of a common interview question. So I hate to ask you, you're applying for a job right now, but where do you see yourself in 5 years?
So 5 years from now, I would have finished my residency.
Yeah.
So I'd be a fully practicing family physician. The where, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
Because I don't really know where I necessarily want to live. But I think the what, I'd be practicing as a physician.
Physician.
And
okay.
I think I would want to have kind of a variety of practice where I'm not doing one singular thing, like a mix of clinic stuff, maybe a mix of hospital work, maybe a little bit of ER stuff, maybe a little bit of pregnancy care. Yeah.
Is there any goals you have outside of career or outside of work, or has that been the main focus right now because you're kind of knees deep in medical school?
Yeah, that's a lot of the focus, I think. But I mean, eventually in my life, I'd like to own a plane. I think that'd be cool. I don't have the means to do it, and I won't for a while. But I think that'd be cool. I've been flying for a really long time, and it'd be nice to have a stake in a plane. I don't know if I'd own it all by myself, but have a small propeller plane, maybe shared with me and 2 or 3 other partners.
Nice. That'd be really cool. You could fly me around all the time.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. Anytime.
Do you think being a pilot is something that's accessible for most people in this country, in the United States?
It is definitely not the most accessible thing
Okay.
in the world. I would say, from a global standpoint, it's more accessible in the U.S. than it is in other countries.
Yeah.
Because the U.S. does have this robust infrastructure for like small plane flying and flight training and things like that. In a lot of other countries, airspace is very restricted and controlled. And in fact, people who want to learn to be pilots, they actually send them to the U.S. from other countries because it's just easier to learn to fly in the U.S.
Yeah.
Now, that's relative on a global scale. I think in the U.S. itself, it's not super accessible to people. I think there's a lot of opportunities for scholarships and things like that, but it is not. It's not particularly cheap at the end of the day. You know, regardless of how you slice it, and it's not something that would be accessible to the everyday person.
Yeah, makes sense. I always like to give the opportunity, and when I say always, this is our very first podcast. I always like to give my guests the opportunity to talk about any projects that they're working on, if there's like a social media channel they want to plug. Is there anything that you want to plug, any place people can find more about you, learn more about you?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to my website. I have a website. It's fly, so FLYKLVK.AERO. It's my personal website. If you're looking to learn to fly, I've got some resources on there, and if you want to get in touch, there's a form on there as well you can fill out, and I'm happy to connect with people individually if they want advice on anything.
So if you guys liked that episode and want to hear more about Srinath, any other aspects of his journey, feel free to comment, and we'd be more than happy to bring him on board, and we can interrogate him some more and learn some more details about his life. Thank you all.
Happy to blab more anytime.